Welcome to Norse Mythology for Sleep, a quiet place where you can let the day fade away and rest while listening to the old sagas from the very beginning to the very end. This first chapter takes you back to the silent void of Ginnungagap, where fire and ice first met, where the giant Ymir was born, and where Odin and his brothers shaped the world from darkness into light. You will hear how the seas, the mountains, the sky, and even the first humans came to be. If you enjoy these bedtime tales, feel free to subscribe and leave a like, but only if you really like it. So, settle in, breathe gently, and let the story carry you toward sleep. Chapter 1. The Void Before Creation, Part 1, The Yawning Void and the Birth of Ymir. Before time began, before even the thought of time had stirred, there was only silence. No wind whispered, for there was no air to move it. No light shone, for there was no eye to see it. No shadow fell, for there was nothing to cast or catch it. There was only Ginnungagap, the yawning void. It was not darkness, for darkness itself was a thing that would come later. It was not emptiness, for in that endless stillness slept the seeds of all that would ever be. It was the breath before the first word, the pause before the first note of the world's great song. To the far north of that vast emptiness lay Niflheim, the world of shadow and frost. From its heart flowed a well older than memory, Hvergelmir, from which sprang 11 rivers of venom and ice. Coiling and crawling outward into the nothingness, they were called the Elivagar, and as they flowed farther from their source, their venom hardened into rime and frost, layer upon layer, until the air itself froze. To the far south burned Muspelheim, the land of living fire. It roared with heat and fury, and in its heart stood Surtur, the first of the fire giants, whose sword blazed brighter than the dawn yet to come. His eyes were flames, his breath smoke, and his laughter the crackling of burning worlds not yet made. Between these two realms stretched the great nothing, Ginnungagap, waiting, timeless, patient. And then, slowly, across the ages, something began to stir. The warm winds of Muspelheim reached northward, chasing across the emptiness, while the icy breath of Niflheim crept south. When they met, the frost began to melt, drop by drop, and where fire and ice touched, life quickened. From that melting frost came the first shape in the void, vast, heavy, and slow. The drops gathered, swelling with the secret power of creation, until a form took shape. Ymir, the first being. He was neither god nor man, but something older than both. A giant born of chaos, his body the bridge between fire and ice. His breath became the wind, his voice the thunder of mountains unborn. When he moved, the void itself shuddered. In the great stillness, Ymir wandered. He found no ground to tread upon, no sky to gaze at, no sun to warm his skin. He was alone in all existence, yet within him burned the spark of life, and that spark could not remain still. As he slept, warmth gathered under his arms, and from his sweat were born the first of his kind, the frost giants, vast and terrible. They multiplied quickly, for chaos begets chaos, and soon the emptiness was filled with the sound of their voices, booming laughter, shouts, and the grinding of bones. But Ymir himself was fed by another creature who emerged soon after from the melting ice, a cow, great and gentle, shining with frostlight. Her name was Audumla. From her teats flowed 4 rivers of milk, white and pure as moonlight. Ymir drank deeply of them, and his strength grew so that each of his steps shook the unseen foundations of the world. Audumla wandered through Ginnungagap, licking the salty ice for sustenance. And as she licked, she uncovered something hidden within the frozen walls, the shape of another being, locked within the ice like a dream waiting to wake. On the first day, as her tongue swept across the frost, a single hair appeared. On the second, a head took form. On the third, the ice broke apart, and from it stepped a figure tall and fair. Buri, the first of the gods, he was strong and noble, radiant even in that lightless void. From him came a son, Bor, and Bor took as his wife Bestla, daughter of the frost giant Bolthorn. From their union were born 3 sons, Odin, Vili, and Ve. And with them came a new will into the world, the will to shape, to order, to create. These young gods looked upon Ymir and his brood, and what they saw was chaos given flesh. The giants had no purpose but to grow and devour, to fight and multiply without end. The gods saw in them the reflection of the void itself, endless, lawless, and without meaning. And so the brothers spoke together, their voices carrying like distant thunder across Ginnungagap. They spoke of balance, of order, of a world that could be shaped and ruled. They spoke of destiny. And in that speaking, the first thought of war was born. Part 2. The Slaying of Ymir and the Shaping of the World. For a time the brothers watched the great giant move through the void, his shadow stretching across all things. They saw his kin gathering, vast and loud, filling the emptiness with their weight. Wherever Ymir walked, frost followed. Wherever he slept, new giants grew from the sweat of his flesh. There was no peace in that endless place, only the restless birth of monsters and the echo of their hunger. The brothers felt the pull of destiny heavy upon them, as if the very fabric of the void whispered that the balance could not hold. Odin, the eldest, spoke first. He was the keenest of sight and thought, and in his eyes burned the faint glimmer of purpose, like a spark caught between worlds. "This cannot endure," he said. "The void was meant to end, not echo forever with his bellowing." Vili, whose heart was bold, struck the hilt of his blade against his palm. "Then we shall end it," he said. But Ve, the youngest, wise in spirit, looked upon Ymir's vast shape, and felt the trembling awe of creation itself. "He is the first of all things," he said softly. "From him all else has sprung. If we strike him down, what will remain?" Odin turned to his brothers and said, "What remains shall be ours to shape." So it was that the 3 sons of Bor resolved to bring down the first being, and in doing so, to bring form to the formless. They watched Ymir from afar, waiting for the time when he slept, for even the mightiest must rest. The air around him shimmered with cold. The blood in his veins moved like glaciers. His breath rose in clouds that froze and fell as snow. The brothers came upon him as he lay deep in slumber, and together they struck. It is said that their weapons were not made of iron or stone, for such things did not yet exist, but rather were shaped from their own will, bound by the first spark of divine thought. Their blows rang out like thunder in a sky that had never known sound, and the echo of their strike split the silence that had held since the dawn of nothingness. Ymir woke and roared. The sound of his pain tore across Ginnungagap, a cry that shook the walls of Niflheim and sent flames dancing higher in Muspelheim. He rose against them, and his blood poured forth in torrents, a crimson flood that swallowed his kin. The battle raged long, though no sun yet measured the hours. The 3 gods fought with all their strength, and at last, with one final stroke, Ymir fell. When the giant's body struck the void, the sound was like the breaking of the world itself. Though the world was not yet born, his blood flowed out in endless waves, filling the emptiness, drowning his children. Only two of his kin survived, a man and a woman, Bergelmir and his wife, who climbed upon a hollow log and were carried away by the flood into the farthest reaches of Niflheim. From them, it is said, the race of giants would be born anew, their hearts forever bearing the memory of their father's death. The brothers stood amidst the silence that followed. The air smelled of iron and salt, though such names were yet unknown. They looked upon the body of the slain giant, vast and still, and they saw in it the raw shape of possibility. Odin lifted his gaze and spoke, "Let us make of him a world." Then the three brothers began their great work. They took Ymir's body and shaped it into the earth. His flesh became the soil, his bones the mountains, his teeth and shattered bones the rocks, and stones that would one day be trodden by the feet of men. His blood became the seas and rivers, pouring out to fill every hollow. From his skull they made the vault of the heavens, and beneath it they placed 4 dwarves, Nordri, Sudri, Austri, and Vestri, to hold it aloft, one at each corner of the world. His hair they scattered across the land, and it became the forests. His eyebrows they shaped into a great wall, and within that wall they made a realm to be the dwelling place of mortals, Midgard, the middle enclosure. And as they worked, the sparks that flew from Muspelheim rose into the heavens. Odin caught them in his hands and flung them high, setting them into the dome of the sky, where they became the first stars, bright beacons to guide the wanderers of all ages to come. Still the brothers labored. From Ymir's skull they carved the clouds, from his breath they made the wind, from his bones the cliffs and deep halls of stone. They gave names to the things they shaped, for naming was the first magic. To speak a thing was to give it meaning, and to give it meaning was to make it real. Thus the first words were spoken, and the first language was born. At last they looked upon what they had wrought, the wide lands, the mountains and seas, the endless heavens, and they saw that it was fair, but it was still empty, silent, without motion save for the wind. Odin stood upon a high place and gazed across the new-formed world. He felt something stir within him, a whisper older than the gods, calling out from the depths of the void. He knelt upon the ground, placed his hand upon the soil, and said, "This world must have roots." Then from the place where his hand touched the earth, a single seed awoke, a seed that had lain hidden since before time began, waiting for the warmth of purpose. It broke through the soil and grew upward, swift and strong, its branches reaching toward the sky, its roots sinking deep into the hidden places below. Thus was born Yggdrasil, the world tree. Its crown stretched high into the heavens, its trunk stood in the heart of the world, and its roots reached into the darkest depths. Around it the brothers shaped the realms, 9 great worlds, each with its place and purpose. At its highest boughs they made Asgard, home of the gods, shining with light and might. Below it lay Midgard, realm of men, encircled by Ymir's brows. Far below that, among the mists, stretched Helheim, the shadowed land of the dead. And beyond them all, across the roots and branches, spread the other realms, some bright, some cold, some hidden in mist or flame. Life began to stir beneath Yggdrasil's shade. The winds whispered through its leaves, carrying the first breath of time. From its roots dripped dew that fell upon the earth, and from that dew new life would some day rise. The brothers stood together beneath the tree, and for the first time there was silence, not of emptiness, but of peace. Odin spoke then, and his voice carried through the young world. The void is ended. From death comes life, from chaos comes order. And though shadows shall fall again, this world shall stand for a time. The wind answered softly through Yggdrasil's branches like the murmur of the ages to come, and so the world was made, shaped from the bones of a giant, sustained by the roots of a tree, and held between fire and frost. Part 3. The Breath of Life and the Dawn of the 9 Realms. The world was still young then, so young that silence lay upon it like a gentle fog, soft and unbroken, and the air itself seemed to listen. The mountains stood raw and new, their peaks wet with the blood of Ymir, and the seas had not yet learned to dance against the shores. Everything waited, even the stars, newly scattered across the firmament, flickered with the faint unease of things unsure whether they were meant to shine or sleep, and in that hush the 3 brothers walked, Odin, Vili, and Ve, the sons of Bor, the first gods. They wandered across the newborn land, feeling its pulse beneath their feet. The soil was still warm from the fires of Muspelheim, and when they knelt and pressed their hands to it, they could feel the faint thrum of the world's heart, the slow and patient beat of something that was not yet alive but wanted to be. The brothers spoke little in those days, for the air was too new for words. They walked through the mists, and the mists curled around them as though they recognized their makers. When they came to the edge of the sea made from Ymir's blood, they stood together and looked out. The water moved with a strange, uncertain rhythm, a pulse like a creature half asleep. Across that endless gray expanse the horizon was not yet born, for there was no sun to paint the line between sky and water. All was one. Odin raised his hand to his brow and looked toward the place where he imagined light might someday rise. "This world has form," he said, "but it has no order." Vili nodded. "There is no time, no change. The world does not breathe yet." And Ve said softly, "Then let us teach it how." So the brothers set to their second great work, the shaping of rhythm, the weaving of time. Odin gathered the sparks that had escaped from Muspelheim, those tiny seeds of fire that drifted across the dark like lost souls. He took the largest of them, breathed upon it, and cast it into the sky. It blazed and grew, becoming the sun, whose light poured down like golden rain upon the world. From the droplets of that light sprang warmth, and from warmth came the stirrings of growth. Then he took a smaller spark, silver and pale, and set it upon the heavens opposite the first. It became the moon, cool and watchful, keeper of dreams and tides. Thus were born day and night, the twin halves of the world's heartbeat. And because every song needs rhythm, Odin gave them motion. He took hold of the sky with both hands and turned it, slow and steady, so that the sun and moon might chase each other forever through the heavens. He set the stars to their courses, teaching them the patterns they should follow, the paths that would guide sailors in ages yet to come and mark the turning of the seasons. Vili, whose strength was will, shaped the clouds and taught the winds to move them. He whispered to the air, and the air began to flow, carrying the scent of salt and soil, brushing over the mountains, filling the still world with the first murmur of life. Ve, who was wise in heart, listened to the murmur of the world and found its music. He drew up the tides and let them fall again, teaching the sea to breathe. He called to the mountains, and they echoed his voice back in thunder. He sang to the rivers, and they learned to run. Together, the three brothers made the world live. The days began to pass, though there was no one yet to count them, and the world grew older by slow degrees. The grass awoke from the soil and stretched toward the sun. The waves began to leap and whisper along the shores. But though beauty filled the earth, it was an empty beauty, for there were no eyes to behold it, no voices to praise it, no minds to give it meaning. And that troubled Odin. He walked the lands in thought, his cloak stirring the dust, his spear, for by then he had fashioned one, gleaming with the light of the stars. He wandered through the forests that had grown from Ymir's hair, and across the plains where rivers met. Wherever he went, the world seemed to hush, as though waiting for him to speak its next command. One morning, or what passed for morning then, Odin came to a place where two trees grew side by side. They were slender and pale, their roots twined together in the damp soil beside a quiet shore. One was an ash tree, tall and upright, its bark smooth and gray. The other was an elm, softer, its leaves trembling in the wind. And when Odin looked upon them, he felt a stirring in his heart. He called for his brothers, and they came. "These trees," Odin said, "are fair to look upon, but I see more within them than wood and leaf. There is the shape of something waiting." The brothers stood together, and they listened, for the world was still so new that if one was very still, one could hear the hum of life moving through all things. A faint whisper like the far-off beating of wings. Odin reached out his hand and touched the ash tree. "This one shall stand tall," he said, "with strength in his limbs and courage in his heart. He shall be the first of men." Then he touched the elm, "And this one shall be his companion, with grace and wisdom in her soul. She shall be the first of women." He breathed upon them, long and slow, and the breath that left his lips was the first wind of life. It entered the trees and stirred within them. The bark softened, the wood grew warm, and the shapes began to change. Vili stepped forward and laid his hand upon them both. "I give you mine," he said. And with that gift they awoke to thought and memory. Va came then, and he spoke softly. "I give you senses, hearing, sight, touch, and taste, and the power to speak." And as he spoke, the air shimmered, and the two shapes opened their eyes. They looked upon the world, and for the first time the world looked back. The gods named them Ask and Embla, and they were the first humans, the beginning of humankind. The brothers clothed them and taught them the names of things, how to call the sea Haf, the sky Hymen, the sun Sol, and the moon Mani. For in naming they taught them to think, and in thinking they became more than flesh. Then Odin said, "You shall dwell within Midgard, which we have made for you. You will live and love and labor and die, and your children will fill the earth." And so it was. Ask and Embla walked into the dawning world, their footprints the first marks ever left upon the soil of Midgard. Behind them, Yggdrasil's roots drank the morning light, and its branches spread wide over all creation. The gods watched from afar, and though they were mighty, something within them stirred, a strange feeling that would not yet have a name for many ages to come. It was pride, yes, but also wonder and a quiet, unspoken fear. For in the eyes of these small, fragile beings, Odin saw the reflection of something new, a spark that mirrored his own. He turned to his brothers. "They are born of us," he said, "yet they are not like us. They will die, as all things must, but while they live, Their dreams will wander farther than ours. They will build and destroy, and from their stories even we shall be remembered." Vili smiled. "Then let us give them a world worthy of their dreaming." And so they began the shaping of the 9 realms, each a branch or root of Yggdrasil's vast body, each with its own purpose and soul. At the crown of the tree they made Asgard, a shining realm where the gods would dwell. Its halls were bright, and its walls tall, built from clouds and starlight. There the gods would hold council, feast, and rule the fates of all creatures below. Beneath it lay Midgard, the home of men, encircled by a wall of the giants' brows, and guarded by the deep sea. Far below the roots of the tree stretched Helheim, where the dead who knew neither glory nor great sin would rest, cold and dreamless. To the east was Jotunheim, the land of the giants, vast and wild, its mountains forever whispering with snow. To the south, Muspelheim, still burning, where fire danced, and Surtur watched with his sword of flame, waiting for the end of days. To the north, Niflheim, cold and silent, where ice never melts, and the rivers of venom flow in slow despair. To the west lay Vanaheim, home of the wise and ancient Vanir, whose ways even Odin did not yet fully know. And among the unseen roots and hidden shadows there were other realms. Svartalfheim, the dark home of dwarves and craftsmen, and Alfheim, the land of the light elves, whose laughter was like the ringing of silver bells. 9 worlds, bound by the roots and branches of one great tree, each different, yet all one. And in the heart of it Odin stood, his gaze lifted to the crown of Yggdrasil, where the stars hung trembling in the dark. He felt the wind move through its branches, heard the whisper of leaves older than the gods themselves, and he knew that though the world was now made, it was not yet finished. For nothing born of creation ever truly ends. It only begins again. The night deepened, the stars burned steadily, the roots of Yggdrasil glowed faintly with life, and across the newborn heavens the moon drifted behind the shoulder of the sun as if to rest. Odin turned to his brothers and said quietly, "Now the world may sleep." And so it did. The seas sighed, the winds hushed, and the great trees shimmered with dew like the memory of dawn. The gods watched in silence as the world's first dream began, a soft, endless dream of light upon water, of breath upon wind, of the sound of distant voices not yet born. And in that dream, time itself began to turn. This was the first chapter of Norse mythology. The saga will continue in the next video. If you enjoy these bedtime tales, feel free to subscribe and leave a like, but only if you really like it. I would also love to hear from you in the comments. What part of this chapter stayed with you the most? Take care, my friend, and I'll see you in the next one.